Hi, welcome everybody. Welcome back. And I believe it's a happy some days today, some special days today.
Palm
So
Sunday.
what is it? Palm
Palm
Sunday.
Sunday.
Yes, I hope you're having a good Palm Sunday. I know some of you are probably in church, but that's okay. Today's guest is a very special guest. He was the governor of International Affairs, Seattle-based. He is, excuse me, saying it wrong already. Here we go. Sorry about that. Is Governor of International Affairs for Seattle-based DA. DA group. Forgive me, guys. Forgive me. I'm having tongue twister moments and lighting issues here. So I apologize. He served 4 years as the board of directors of Strategic Bank in Puerto Rico, and he has done 7 years registered representative Alpha Source Capital Securities LLC in New York, and he was the Minister of Foreign Investment Aviation of the Republic of Macedonia from 2006 to 2008, along with a host of other things, including help bring internet to Macedonia and other parts of Western Europe. Please welcome Minister Gligor Tashkovich. Sorry, Gligor, Mr. Tashkovich. Minister, it's hard. It's so hard. I apologize. My lighting is not good today. But also saying the titles is very, challenging for me because I don't do them often. So please forgive me. It's no disrespect, of course, to of all people, not you. So I hope you forgive me for that.
It's a pleasure to be here, Tanya. I'm so proud of all that you've accomplished in life and where you've gone, and now your daughter too. So happy for all of you.
Oh, thank you very much. So you've done a lot since school, and I always knew that you'd do something great because I don't know, something about you, and you were just extremely bright. But also just your nature, I knew that something great. And so while you were serving in Macedonia, I see that you had created something like 1,200 jobs, and you brought in like $55 million or something to that effect.
1.5 billion.
Billion. Sorry. See, there I go. And that to me is amazing. How did you get to that? To go from, the smart gentleman who graduated Cornell, and knew you'd do something great. But how did you go from that to becoming the Prime Minister of Foreign Investment?
It's a slightly longer story. Should I tell you the long story or the short story?
I got time. It's up to you.
Okay. So I think you really have to go back to how I got involved in Macedonia at all.
Mm-hmm.
Right? My late father came from Macedonia.
Mm-hmm.
He met my mother at Cornell University.
Mm-hmm.
But it's important to understand sort of that history,
right,
in the context to answer your question.
Yes.
My grandfather, after whom I was named but never met, was a leader of the Democratic Party there from roughly 1925 through the end of World War II.
Mm-hmm.
And he was jailed or arrested 3 different times during World War II. The first time his followers stormed the prison and got him out. The second time his parents traveled to Sofia, Bulgaria, and got an audience with King Boris, who pardoned him. And the third time, his captors didn't want him released, so they moved him around from prison to prison every couple of weeks so he couldn't be found. And he later told my parents he served time in 30 separate prisons during the war.
Wow. So you have this basically in your blood, leadership.
Something, maybe. Yeah. So now fast forward to then cutting the story a little short.
Okay.
He found his way to Alexandria, Egypt, where he was a broadcaster for the U.S. government-sponsored Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty into Yugoslavia. He broadcasted news, translated the news in English into this region, and there was a group here in New York City called the International Rescue Committee, the IRC. The website is rescue.org, and they at the end of the war realized there were all these leaders of democratic movements who faced either lifetime imprisonment or death for being on the wrong side of the boundary line, right, between East and West, right? And so they went ahead and rescued roughly some 40 leaders of democratic opposition movements, including my grandfather. And he came to America. Well, actually, this is interesting. It wasn't until after my grandmother died in 2000 that I was digging in the filing cabinet in the back of a secondary clothes closet, and I found this padded red, it was like velvet, but kind of padded leather, oversized passport. Not even a holder, but the passport itself was oversized. And it was issued by the Royal Kingdom of Albania's embassy in Cairo. And my grandfather had an assumed name, that is to say, his last name was Albanianized, different spelling, but you can tell. And that's how he came to America. And if I had not seen and held that passport in my own hands, I never would have believed that story.
Wow. Wow. So at that moment, did the light bulb go on that one day?
No, because that was in 2000. I'd already been working. I'd already made, I don't know, 25, 30 trips to Macedonia in my lifetime at that point.
Wow.
And those trips were very young. When I went in 66, I went in 73, I went in 83. I didn't speak the language. The water was terrible, i.e. it wasn't healthy to drink the water.
Right.
And I got sick. And I really wanted to have nothing to do with the country ever again in 83 when I left. I was like, I'm done. I'm out of here. I went because Dad wanted to show me off to his friends, but that was about it. And so then in 89, you've heard of the World Economic Forum and the Davos meeting, right? So I used to work for Klaus Schwab, the founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum in 89. And that November, when the Berlin Wall tumbled in 89, I remember reading articles in what was then called the International Herald Tribune, now the International New York Times, about how people, our generation, were going back to the countries of their foremothers and their forefathers and doing business. And I'm like, well, I've been there 3 times, and theoretically, I should be back doing business, but I've got no interest, no contacts, I just wasn't interested. But I read the stories with interest. And it was in November of 91 that Macedonia became the last of, I forget, 30 some odd countries to break away from the old Eastern Europe, Soviet Union mode. Right. I mean, of course, Yugoslavia was non-aligned, right? It's very important to point this out. It was non-aligned, but it was socialist. So not communist like Bulgaria just across the border, but it still had elements, strong elements of socialism, even though it wasn't communist, right? And so, it too fell apart. Marshal Tito, the head of state of Yugoslavia from end of World War II until he died in 1980, Yugoslavia was governed by a council of presidents, one person from each of the constituent states that made up Yugoslavia, including Macedonia. And then it spun off, basically.
Right, and they want
in the 1991 timeframe. So we were the last to become independent. And then, actually, it's not true. Of the existing states, we were last to become independent. Kosovo became independent later on in 2007 or 8. And so we, how to say, so anyway, so the rescue committee brought my grandfather to New York in 48. He eventually remarried. His new wife's best friend's husband was Dr. David Gurevich. And Dr. David Gurevich was the personal physician of Eleanor Roosevelt, who then was widowed and was the first U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. And there have been, I think, 3 books written about their relationship. It was so instrumental and significant in the course of political events. And Mrs. Roosevelt, Ambassador Roosevelt, wrote a letter to Marshal Tito asking for him receiving a political pardon for my grandfather's children, the 3 sons.
Really?
And that's how my father came to America. And his new stepmother had come from a very successful family that had founded Bear Stearns, which no longer exists. It died in the 2008 financial crisis, but it was around for some decades. Founded Stearns department stores, also, which has faded away at this point, been merged in with Macy's ultimately.
Wow.
And so on. So she had applied to Cornell in my father's name on his behalf without ever meeting him. Right. He hadn't even come to America yet, but she said he has got to get on to school and we'll make the application for him. Right. And he was admitted, but he spoke no English. That would be unthinkable today.
Wow.
But luckily architecture was a field that, you could sketch and draw and you could point and you didn't need to be able to give book reports. Right. So it worked out somehow.
So your dad is also a Cornell grad?
Yeah. My parents met at Cornell.
Wow. So now, did you get legacy? Even though we know you have the wherewithal.
No. So the thing is that I didn't apply early decision because I was afraid I would get into Cornell on my parents' merits, not my own. So I applied to Dartmouth early decision. They wouldn't let me in. Okay. And then I applied regular admission to Cornell, but regular admission is much harder. Cornell has, and probably other schools too, strongly recommends that you have a legacy status as a school. You should apply to the school early decision. Okay. So I I bypassed that whole thing in the end. I got on my own.
Good for you. Well, we knew that could be happening because not to toot your home for you, but we always knew.
Anyway, so now fast forward to 91, country declares independence, and in February of 92, Dad got a fax, which I have here in its faded glory in my filing cabinet. Dad got a fax from the president inviting him to return to the land of his birth to realize his father's dream for democracy and capitalism. Oh, wow. Because my grandfather was in charge of the Democratic Party and he did some pretty cool things. He also ran a civil engineering firm. He was the only civil engineer, probably the most prominent anyway, civil engineer in Macedonia who built infrastructure to earthquake standards because other people were so concerned about, winning bidding contracts and stuff like that, they would just build them any which way. But then when we had this huge earthquake in 63, it destroyed a lot of the country. It was only my grandfather's structures that survived.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. That is amazing.
It's pretty wild. Yeah. So, and it was a big earthquake too, 5:17 in the morning, August of 63. Anyway, so President Gligorov, I share a name with him, right? His name was Gligorov, O-V at the end. Invited the family back. My brother was in law school, so Dad, Mom, and I went back in about 5 weeks later in late March of 92. And we're sitting in the president's office on the second floor of the apartment building, which my grandfather's civil engineering firm had built. And and the president gestures through the window, and he said, "Look around you," he said. "You see what you take for granted in America, and make it happen here. You have my blessing. We need everything. Just go do it." Wow. And so that led me on this journey until about 2000, late 2002. So fully 10 and a half years of going back and forth to Macedonia, trying in every possible way, in every possible sort of sector to build relations with the rest of the world, exchange programs, funding programs, diplomatic relations with other countries. In fact, here, just discussion. I have a picture here. I don't know if you can see, how can you see this like this, but it's not.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Look at that. There's everybody.
This is a picture taken November of 1993 in the mission of the Republic of Angola to the United Nations.
Wow.
And I wrote the agreement that they signed. They were letters of diplomatic recognition that allowed the countries to recognize each other and do business and have visa-free trade and travel and stuff like that.
That is amazing. Wow.
And I was what, 27. It was wild.
27? You were that young? Whoa.
Right. It was 65, 90, 25, right? And 2 more years. Yeah, 27. It's crazy.
That's a big accomplishment. I mean, that is amazing, Minister. That is absolutely amazing. There's some parts of that I don't even know, except for what I read. You know what I'm saying? So this is enlightening for me.
Yeah, so it's just fun. So a lot of So I did lots of things. I brought in, I'm sure at some point in your life, you've used Western Union money transfer. Most people have used it at least once, right?
Yes.
And so I brought Western Union to Macedonia because they had no international banking connections. There was no way people could send money back except to carry in, thousands of dollars in cash for their relatives.
Wow. Is that why people used to do that? And I know people used to do that. Is that why they did that? Now I know.
Yeah, they didn't. I mean, we later got banking connections and stuff like that, but they were few and far between.
Well, so when you went, when was your point of going to assess? Okay, what is needed, and this is how I.
That was a trip with mom and dad.
Okay.
And then I had at that particular moment, that year, 92, I was serving as a quality assurance inspector for Trans World Airlines.
Right.
So I was able to travel for free anywhere they flew in the world because I was assessing the flights. And so I would fly down to Athens from New York for free, and then take a short jump into flight up to, actually, it wasn't so short. Because Greece didn't recognize Macedonia, I had to fly up to Belgrade, then come back down.
Right.
Skopje, or take a train up to Macedonia. But either way, it wasn't so easy once I got there. It was just cheaper. That's all.
Okay. Yeah, there was what was that whole thing about Greece and Macedonia? That has been a thing for a while.
Well, it was. We solved it by changing our name from Republic of Macedonia to Republic of North Macedonia.
Okay.
5 or 6 years ago.
Right.
But what was that about?
Yeah, the short version.
That was really about the Greek government not taking responsibility. Now, back then, this is before the euro, right? So Greece was on the drachma. That was their national currency. And it was about the Greek government not taking responsibility for their economic distress and hyperinflation, and trying to take the mind off their citizens' buying power, which was diminishing by the day, and trying to focus their wrath on the creation of a common enemy, which is us, right? And we didn't have, we were the third poorest country, depending on what metric you're using, on the European continent, right? There was Albania, later there was Kosovo, us, Moldova, but that's it, right? And to suggest that somehow we, a non-NATO power and already one of the poorest economies on the continent, were somehow in any way a threat to Greece is so ludicrous that people overlook that because of the success of the Greek government's public relations thing. They had, you arrive in Athens airport, there would be books, I remember this vividly, books from the Greek tourism industry, books from the Greek sugar industry. There were banners, T-shirts, posters, even on the nose cone of Olympic Airways jets. It said Macedonia is Greek.
Really?
License plates, holders. It was an insane campaign.
Wow.
And people signed up for it. And all of a sudden we were like this big evil devil.
Wow. Well, how did you bring about peace to that whole solution when you were there? What did you did a lot?
I didn't. That wasn't an area I was involved in. My mentor, Ambassador Matthew Nimitz, was the one who negotiated that for, I think, from the late 90s until the end, until 2017, 2018. But the problem was you could never hold those discussions if there was either a local election, meaning mayors, a parliamentary election, meaning Congress, or a presidential election in either one of the countries within a 6-month window, because it was so politically charged. So that means the opportunities when there was none of these 6 elections taking place simultaneously were the only chances you had over this very long period of time to some 18, 20 years to solve this issue. And actually, I take it back. I did play a role after I left the government in 2008. And I came back to New York. I met up with an old friend of mine who I won't mention publicly. He was very close with Papandreou, who became the prime minister of Greece some months after I came back. And through that connection, I passed him the cell phone number of the prime minister, the foreign minister, and perhaps somebody else, I forget, maybe Minister of Defense or something, of Macedonia, so they could just call them up directly, cold call them and say, look, let's talk.
Mhm.
And Papandreou, to his great credit, had a number of very positive meetings with the prime minister in secret around the world at different international fora, where they might have solved the problem, except for the fact that Papandreou then was kicked out of power before he could implement the ideas.
Right. Wow. Oh, wow. And now I know you also was key in helping with the team that brought internet to
Right,
Western
I
Europe.
helped build it. I was named in 1985,
Mhm.
September, October of 85. I was named the U.S. delegate to the technical committee of the European Academic and Research Network. It's called the EARN Network. At that time, Western Europe was behind America in networking. They didn't have all the email stuff that we already had of them. Most people didn't know we had it, but academic researchers and scientists, government researchers knew we had it, right? And we and I was working at the National Science Foundation in Washington, D.C. at the time, as part of a Cornell in Washington program. So I was still a full-time student. I was only taking 12 credits, which was the minimum you needed to maintain your full-time status.
Mhm.
And I was working 60 hours a week for the NSF downtown.
Wow.
And
Wow.
we were building a national research education network, a whole backbone
Mhm.
that we folded all these little disparate networks
Mhm.
all across the country onto, that
Mhm.
gave us at the time what was considered to be very high speed. Today it's speed you get to your apartment, but back then it was very high speed.
Wow.
And
So,
so the office I worked for, the Office of Advanced Scientific Computing, had a tendering process by which any institution or government, any university or government lab could request a supercomputer, and they could specify in their proposal, they had to specify what computer they wanted, any manufacturer, any make, any country, didn't matter. And then they would say what they would use that supercomputer for in their institution, in their city, in their county, in their state, in their region.
okay.
And then they were assessed and they were picked to be Cornell, John von Neumann Center at Princeton, which later dropped out, University of Illinois at Champaign-Urbana, on the southern tip of Illinois, National Center for Atmospheric Research in Boulder, Colorado, and University of California at San Diego. And this was a backbone, if you will, across the country, right? And then everything else is folded onto it.
Wow. That's
And so I was then told to go over to Europe and make sure the Europeans didn't do something as silly like they had done previously. If you think you cross a pond a bit, but you remember the old days, VHS and Betamax.
yes, I remember.
Right, and 110, 220 voltage, and 3 prongs and funny prongs and all that for that. Right, it's all because these things weren't coordinated with the Americans. And so my job was to make sure that they adopted the same technologies that we already were using in America, so we didn't have to play games. Now,
Right.
England was already ahead of the continent, and they were off doing their own thing with something called JANET, the Joint Academic Network. And it was at that very first committee meeting in September, October of 85 that we came together. We were maybe 16 members at the time. But I was the only U.S. delegate. The other countries in Europe that were connected to the network had 2 members on the committee. And one of the French members, I mean, I was only whatever I was, 19 or something. But one of these members, a French guy, was 16, right? And he was a genius, Eric Thomas, or Thomas, but Eric Thomas in French. And he literally, over the course of the weekend, wrote networking gateway software that allowed the continent to speak to England when other people had tried and failed to do this. It was such an incredible accomplishment.
Now, now you got into computers back from high school, or was it during college?
So you remember Anthony Joseph?
Yes.
From high school? So Anthony and I were best friends since first grade.
Okay.
And so we both got involved in computers, maybe him a year before I did or something. But I think I got started in 8th grade.
Yeah, I remember, but you don't think about those things at the time,
Sure, of
so
course you don't. Right.
it's
But
like,
then,
okay.
but the really good story was
Mhm.
in the summer after our freshman year at Cornell in high school at Fox Lane. So after ninth grade,
Mhm.
um, maybe it was towards the end of our second, or of the end of our freshman year. Remember Mr. Keller in the math department?
Yes.
Mr. Keller called Anthony and I in and said, the Curriculum Council of the Board of Education wants to build out a computer room here in the high school, but we don't know what computers to get. You guys know everything about computers, so why don't you spec it for us and we'll go out and buy it. We're like, great. So we wrote this whole report and inspected and priced it and all that. We sent it in. We actually had to defend it in front of the Board of Education over the summer at a meeting they had. And
Mhm.
then we came back in September, right, Wednesday after Labor Day, and there were all these boxes in the high school commons, the ceiling, all the computers, everything we asked for, they bought 100%. And
Wow.
so then Anthony and I had to assemble the whole computer room for the rest of the school.
I don't know why, but I feel like that's almost a memory that I have of something going on, some buzz or something around that time. But I can't. It's been so long. But that's amazing that you've been a leader in stuff that we now see, but we didn't know the backstories to, and the people who were starting that whole thing. Sort of like as if Steve Jobs and all the people at Microsoft when they first started in their college dorm type thing.
Right. And so now I'm going to Athens, I think on the 18th or 19th of April.
Okay.
18th, I think it is. I'm going to Athens for the first reunion of all of us involved with that 40 years ago in Western Europe.
That's amazing. It should be on the news. That's a big newsworthy.
Yeah, I think it should be. Actually, you're right. I didn't think about that. It should be. It should be.
Definitely. Because
So,
if you think about where we are now, and I remember when we didn't have computers or didn't have it wasn't a thing then. As a matter of fact, the only people I knew were people who were either executives or big time people. But the only people I knew that even had those, even a cell phone back then. I mean, nothing. I
well,
don't
cell
remember.
phones weren't until the early 2000s or so. That's much near the BlackBerry, right? So
actually, yeah, I was going to say, didn't they have something? Because I remember when I used to model in the 80s. An ex-boyfriend of mine, maybe it was that no, it was
they
80s.
were pagers back then. You might have had a pager.
Maybe he had a pager, but he had something to that effect. I thought he had a big. When did the big block ones come out? Was it the 80s?
The BlackBerry, or because they were big, satellite phones that were heavy. They were like bricks.
Yes,
they were big.
They were. Yes.
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy.
The Iridium phones were huge like that.
Wow. Well, that should be definitely newsworthy, I think, because we don't think about it now because we're so in it now. We do Facebook, we have social media, we have all these things, chat, AI, blah, blah, blah. And we know these, you probably knew this stuff before we did. But now that we know it, if you look back, you're like, how do we live without this stuff?
Right. No, and those of us who help build it are aware of its dangers, right? And we see them around us all day long. I still make paper copies of everything I have. I don't trust the cloud.
Wow.
I know better, right? I'm very untrusting, I would say. But I have here behind me, I have 11 filing cabinets, or 11 filing cabinet drawers, I should say.
Right.
And they're full, and it's because I don't want to be in a situation where I'm relying on the cloud. I mean, yes, there could be a fire that I've lived for 25 years and knock on wood. Right. It's a brick building. So,
right. Well, I mean, I'll speak about this for 1 second, but because this is something you do, my paranoia as well about that. And, I know my friends, and I think, even you, a few people have told me, well, you should get to know what AI is, and you should at least know how the general workings. And I can agree with that, because if you don't know, you will get left behind. But then the part of me feels like, darn it, the more you feed the beast, the bigger the beast gets, in my opinion. So now
what's really true in AI, right? Because it learns from itself. It learns from your input. Absolutely true. And so that brings us back to all those sci-fi novels about a computer being smarter than us, and IBM's Watson program, which plays chess and all that, right? This is all related.
Yes. Well, I'm glad you're saying it to us. I had a tech tell me quietly that he's like, every time you play those games, you know, the ones where you make your face look pretty or whatever it is they do.
Right.
I was like, oh, we love those. And he was like, stop loving them because they're getting to know all your behaviors. And one day they can act just like you, sound just like you. And I was like, oh no, which I know this in a microcosm way, but it's like, you don't think like this robot could actually take over me. Like someone would think you're going to think it's really me because it sounds like my voice. It sounds like my speech pattern and intonation. I don't know. So you don't know.
Well,
How do
no,
you
hang
balance- how do you
on. I
balance
mean, they've literally made commercials doing that of other people, right?
Yes.
In this year, it's
Yeah.
happening right now.
That's what the film fight was over. The SAG and stuff was that literally.
As well. Yes.
Yeah.
In addition, right.
We don't need you to come back for a voice.
I'm talking about political commercials being released with images of, you know, Biden.
Well, it's oh, those right. Because now that's the thing with fake news and real news. Like with that happening, how do we know? I don't know. You really, unless you're really savvy and know how to break under the first 8 layers of Google, pretty much, or know what site to go to get to the real stuff. You don't know what's real because it's easy. If someone's smart in tech, they can easily fool us. And that's anybody. That's me, you, it could be anybody.
If you or one of your colleagues has a subscription to the New York Times, you can Google search for this within their website.
Okay.
They had an article which was a test, an AI test, and they showed you 2 pictures, like I don't know, 10 times, and you could say, and you had to choose which picture was altered using AI, and it told you why and why not. I mean, it was really interesting.
I'll look that up because it's something that it gnaws at me at night when I'm thinking like, oh my God, this thing is watching me. And
right.
You don't want to think about it, but then all the movies come out and really scare the crap out of you and make you think, oh wow. So that was not, and I watched a documentary the other day that really blew my mind. I said, oh my God. But now we're so far in that even if I say, I'm going to get rid of all my social media, all my computers, everything, guess what? I don't get the early bird is not going to get the worm at all because nothing works without it right now. Nothing. You can't get a job.
Right. Difficult. Sure.
Yeah.
No, but for example, you know, when I'm not using the camera, I have a manual cover that goes over it so that it can't be turned on when I'm not aware it's turned on. Right.
Yes.
So I cover the camera. When I'm traveling, I have a private Wi-Fi service that secures my connections, right? Because the channel between your computer and who you're communicating with isn't always protected. So I encrypt it, right? And there are things like this, or things you can do to be more savvy. Okay.
Well, guys, you got a piece of advice for today. So if nothing else, take that, just covering the camera alone and getting a different IP from the regular, because I didn't realize that too. You could be sitting in a public place right now. If you take on their Wi-Fi,
sure,
they have a field that I had no clue that people could literally be snatching your information as you're sitting there. And I'm starting to think that's a great place for these people to go because they know it's open Wi-Fi. They know somebody
like Starbucks or something like that, or a hotel lobby or whatever. The other example would be if you cross the border at the airports in China. China in particular, I'm sure other countries do it too. Some other countries at least do it too. China, maybe it's United Arab Emirates. I'm not sure. Anyway, certainly China. If you have a cell phone, they scan your cell phone as you walk through immigration and baggage claim. Right? Wow. Everything, contacts, phone numbers, everything comes right off. Now, that's the reason why I don't have a Samsung or an Apple phone. I was using, well, this isn't it. I was using a BlackBerry.
Oh, really?
It's actually, here's a BlackBerry. Here, this is a BlackBerry with the hard keyboard. And I'm now, but it finally died after 4 years. And I could buy another one, except that it's only Android level 8. And now they're up to Android 14 or 15 now. And it seems to me maybe I should have a slightly more modern system, but I'm not convinced it's necessary. The only reason I'm even considering it is because my banking app and my hotel app don't work on Android 8 anymore. But this is a phone by Unitech. It looks almost like the BlackBerry.
Okay.
and but the screen's a bit smaller, so I don't like it. I'm going
Okay.
to. I've already gotten the other version, which is here. It's called the Titan.
The Titan. I've heard of this one.
Have you?
I think I've heard of the Titan. Some of my friends are in tech. Let me see what it looks like.
It looks like this
Okay,
versus
no.
that.
Wow, very similar, but a bigger screen.
So I'm going to switch over to this one. I just got it the other day,
Okay.
and see if it works for me. But this uses Android 11, so I know it'll be secure, but it won't be readable because, quite frankly, you know, if I'm working for the government and I'm developing a system that does what I'm describing, that swipes your data as you cross through immigration, right? I'm going to make it for the most popular phones in the world, Samsung and Apple. I'm not going to waste my time
on
trying to make it for the small number of phones that people have, like from other manufacturers, right? So my hope is that between the software I have on my phone, the fact that maybe I have it off when I go through these systems, maybe I take out the SIM card. I haven't been to China since it started, so I haven't figured out what I'm going to do exactly yet. But I feel that you know, I'm going to be okay. At least you know, data point of 1, but whatever.
I was going to ask you when like even when you were serving your time as minister, what were some of your biggest? What would be one of your biggest challenges in protecting information is one of them. So that's when you said that. I think of anyone in government, anyone in any kind of field that has personal private information. How do they protect it? So this is interesting to know that you use an older phone versus, you know, everybody.
But no one's from a different manufacturer, right? No one uses a BlackBerry today. I was probably the last one in the world, anyone who used a BlackBerry.
I know.
I mean, you can buy them on eBay and Amazon. They're like $600 each, and I may end up, if this one doesn't work, I may end up going back and doing that. I can live without a banking app and a hotel app; it won't kill me. But I really do value the fact that it has a different technology inside.
Wow. So, wow. See, I was always into the Apple, and now I'm starting not to like that. So much stuff can be breached easy, and I thought
I don't need to have the world's most amazing camera on my phone. I'm using it more for. I'm a typist, so I'm using it more for communications than for anything else.
Wow. Well, thank you for those. Those are very good little nuggets that we have to all keep and remember, because you know we don't think about it, but it's something to really think about now. We're going to say in your time, what you know, with the way the world's going today, is there any advice that you can offer in the financial sector, in every element of life right now? Things are just kind of weird right now going on between politics and what's about to happen, who's about to get in, not get in. So we don't want to go into that part. But for my viewers, my basic person, is there any advice that you can give with your financial background? Any advice you can give for someone who's just a regular, average working, hardworking American? Any advice that you can give them?
Yeah, I would actually. Let me get it out here.
Okay.
Here.
Yeah, because we don't think about these things, but I always say, well, if someone has the knowledge, we definitely want to ask them.
This is the Bilt credit card from Wells Fargo.
Yeah.
Have you heard of it before?
No. Bilt.
Okay. Bilt is the only credit card in America you can use to pay your rent or your mortgage or your maintenance.
What?
They don't advertise it that way. They advertise it only for rent, but you could use it for your mortgage or maintenance and nobody would be any the wiser. On a monthly basis and earn frequent flyer miles.
Oh.
It's a no fee credit card, so there's no annual fee. Obviously, you should pay it off in full every month. I don't mean to imply that it's free money, right? But the point is, as I'm sure you're aware, most credit cards these days, or at least you have many options, you can earn either hotel points or frequent flyer miles on your credit card, right, for every charge you make. But the problem has been that landlords will not take credit cards unless you pay, say, a 3 to 5% fee, right? And so what this does is it allows you to do this for only one vendor. You can set this up manually where you enter the routing information and account number of your landlord, for example, or your bank if it's a mortgage or something. And once a month on the date you specify, it will bill you and send the money to your landlord or your bank.
Okay.
And you'll pay it on your credit card statement.
Oh,
It's
now,
it's genius.
now it is genius, but wait, one question. So now may be outdated information. I am not as you know, I'm not the financial whiz at all. And that's because I didn't choose that as my thing. But if you want to stay in a 30% threshold of your credit card, let's say, then how does that work? So, because most of the average person, if you just because you get 10,000, don't mean you spend 10,000, right? So if I go pay my rent or my mortgage, and I'm out of that, I'm making this up. If I'm out of that range, how does that work on credit score? You know what I'm saying? Or is that different?
Well, so anyway, look, on the assumption that you can afford to pay your rent,
Okay.
that's an assumption, right? In my statement, right?
Yeah.
Then by putting more money through a credit card, you're actually going to increase your credit score because it shows greater responsibility for a greater volume of cash, right? As opposed to them deducting from your bank account. So it actually increases your credit score over, say, 6+ months.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to figure out. Okay, so then good. That's not an issue then.
No, it's a plus. It's definitely a plus.
That's good. Now it's hard to get.
It is a no-fee card. That's great. What's the catch? The only catch is you have to use the card 5 times a month on anything. It could be $1 Diet Coke or whatever it is,
right?
Or a piece of candy or something. But you have to use it 5 times a month in order to get the miles from your rent purchase for that month.
Okay, that's not bad. That's not bad at all. I'll look into that. Built. I put it up there for you guys if you guys want to check it out. And it's which bank is it?
Wells Fargo.
It is Wells Fargo. Oh, okay.
Somebody commented that commented
right here. A lot of folks may not qualify for the card. Well, I mean,
you won't know unless you try.
right, and that's just people who have basic, standard income. I'll say probably. I'm gonna imagine because any credit card is like that. You have to have a certain income to get it. Yeah, that's just the thing. But it's just another way for you to pay, and an advice that if you can, that's get it out of your hair. Now, the opposite question to that is so a lot of people think that the money system is going to be changed, and we're going to have this big thing where cash is not a thing, and everything's going to be on a card. So how do we not be paranoid about that? How do I say it? How do we not?
What are you being paranoid about? Sorry, what?
Well, because I keep hearing down the pipeline that they're taking away the money system. Everything's going to be in a card. You can't do anything with a card. And I know in England here, in this part where I'm at, a lot of places won't take your money unless you got to pay on a card for anything. So
really?
Some people,
England? Wow.
In London and some parts of London. So some parts I hate that personally. I don't like someone telling me how to spend my money. I want to be able to spend it however I want. If I want to pay in all cash, I should be able to pay all cash. If I want to pay all credit card, I want to pay credit card. How do I override those fears of all these conspiracy theories that everything's going to be on card?
There are an enormous number of conspiracy theories. I grant you that. Right. But I serve on the Bretton Woods Committee.
Okay.
So the what was it? Either 43 or 44 Bretton Woods Agreement signed in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire after World War II. Created the World Bank and IMF.
Yes, the World Bank. Yes,
and IMF, International Monetary Fund, and so our members are generally present and past ministers of finance, present and past central bank governors. Yes. I kind of squeezed in there too as a minister of foreign investment. Top bankers around the world. CEOs, chairman of major banks around the world and stuff. And so we advise IMF and World Bank and meet a few times a year to talk about things like this, right? So I'll tell you that central banks around the world are all looking at digital currencies and stuff like that. They have study groups. It's public information. It's not a secret. You can find it. There's also a group called OMFIF, Frank India Frank, OMFIF, and they have free free panels and stuff and lots of resources on their website, but they also look at monetary issues. But do I think we're going to come to a day in our lifetimes where cash is not king anymore? No.
Good. Well, that's good to hear, because I love cash. I'm just saying. It's a thing. Because my mom trained me different. And while she had all the credit cards and all the whatever you want to have, she always said, you don't need to go into any debt, pay cash if you can. And that was I grew up thinking that way. And now I have to rethink that, because it's not going to be the way eventually.
Yeah, I'm not worried about it in our lifetimes, perhaps in your daughter's lifetime.
Good. Okay. So that's good to know. That's a plus. Yeah. So last thing, back to the minister. Let's see. There was one question I had for you. Most important question, which is why we had you here today. How were you able to, how is someone able to work in foreign government, right? And be an American citizen? Because I know. Yeah.
So it's a funny story. So so July 4th or 5th, 2006, Macedonia had parliamentary elections.
Yes.
Now, back in, I think it was early December of 99, I had breakfast with a very young 28-year-old minister of trade for Macedonia in Toronto at the Sheraton Hotel, up on the top level. It was a great room, fantastic room. And we spent 3 hours talking. At the end, I said to him, Nicola, I don't know how and I don't know when, but I see you to be the ability to become prime minister, and hope that happens one day. I really like the ideas that you have, right? And we stayed in touch once or twice a year. He came to New York, where I was going to Macedonia still at that point, and we'd see each other for coffee, whatever. And then in his party lost power in 2002 at the elections, and then there was typically what happens is the head of the party that loses the election gives his head, right? And so this guy no longer was head of the party, and Nicola ended up becoming head of the party as a result of this issue, and he led his party back to successful elections 4 years later. Okay, so it's now 2006, July 4th, 5th, and I get word that his party has won the parliamentary elections, and he's head of the party. So I call him up, 30-second call. Nicola, congratulations. I told you would do it. This is really great news. Go forth and make the country great, right? And I said, it was a 30-second call, really quick. And so and that was it. That was the extent of my involvement. 2 weeks later, I started getting calls from members of the diaspora all around the world, from Australia, from Canada, from Europe, from everywhere. Why are you on the front page of the paper today? I said, I'm on the front page of the paper today. What are you talking about? And they said, yeah, it's above the fold on page 1. There's this picture of you by a military tank, which I later ID'd as being a picture that was taken of me in, I think it's called Fort Lewis up by Seattle, Washington, near Boeing Field, or what used to be Boeing Field. And the screaming headline, very large, bold lettering, it says, Tashkovich, imminently to be named Deputy Prime Minister.
What?
And I'm like, oh my God, that's wild. It's like, I couldn't even made that up. It's so wild, right? And so every day for 3 weeks, in one or more of 9 newspapers in the country covering a different part of the political spectrum or different ethnicity, because there were papers for everything, right? Same picture, same screaming headline, same article. And I was really a bit bemused, because I'd been working obviously in the country for over a decade. All the media had my phone numbers and my email. They knew how to reach me. This wasn't an issue. I'd been interviewed many times before. Right. And I also knew they'd received training sponsored by the U.S. government about how important it was to make sure you make an effort to contact the subject of your article. Right. And no one contacted me. And I was in this article, same article was reprinted all around. And I thought, man, this is really strange. But I just let sleeping dogs lie. And then 3 weeks into that, on August 6, 2006, I got a call from Nicola, who by then was, putting together his government. This is a parliamentary democracy for your listeners. So what that means is that his party controlled 34 of 120 seats. In order to form a new government in the parliamentary democracy, you have to have the support of at least half plus one, right? So 61 of 120 seats, and he had 68 seats. And he cobbled together 4 parties, of which he was one, and 3 other parties, and they formed this government, right? And actually, here, wait, I'll just show you this picture real quick.
That is amazing. Wow.
Here is a picture we took the night that we were all inaugurated.
Wow.
So well, like that.
That's amazing. Wow.
And so the joke is everyone looks like they're going to kill somebody. They look all very serious, right? And there's me in the top row grinning ear to ear. I'm so excited to be there.
That's amazing. Wow. That is amazing. So you got pretty much elected into or asked into.
Right. So asked to join the government. And I was like, I don't want to swear on your show, but like, no blank, Sherlock. I was like, really? I had no idea. It's been in the news every day for 3 weeks, and everyone's been calling me from all around the world. I had no idea.
Wow. The guardian angel saying, this is where we want you to be. And who would have thought that all of your past studying and life travels and all that stuff would have brought you to that spot so that you could actually do what you did. You created all those jobs. You created all the what's it, $55 billion. All that takes a lot of stuff.
$1.5 billion of new foreign investment.
Oh, I'm thinking of the other thing that you worked on, which was,
what was that?
The small companies. What is the name of it? I had it here somewhere. I apologize.
Oh, sorry. The
300 companies that
the
you got.
Innovation and Technological Development Fund.
Yes,
Sorry,
that's where that number came from.
Yeah, that was later.
Yeah,
that was 2018, 2019. Right.
Yeah, I mean, you have so much. I didn't even get to ask you half of the questions I wanted to ask you.
Come back for a second round. We'll see what your audience says. If I haven't bored them to death, see what they say.
No, of course not. We're never bored here, because if we learn anything new, it is always helpful for advancing us as better people, in my opinion. So there's nothing bad.
So let me answer your question. So because I did answer it. So the first call I made after that invitation to join the government from the incoming prime minister was not to my mother, but to the State Department. And I remember I had dialed them so many times I knew what the number was: 202-647-4000. And I asked for the legal office, and I was connected, and I got the most annoying lawyer on the phone. Okay. And I explained very excitedly, I just got this call from the incoming prime minister. He wants me to join his government, but I'm an American citizen, and I know I need your permission, so can I have your permission?
Right.
And he says to me, oh, in a very condescending voice, right? Oh, Mr. Tashkovich, he says, I'm looking at a piece of paper on my desk, and this piece of paper is entitled Potentially Expatriating Acts. And there are 30 ways you can lose your citizenship. And number 1 on this list is taking an oath of office to a foreign country. He's acting, I didn't know any of this, right? So it's like, yes, sir, I know this. That's why I'm calling you.
Right.
And so he was going to be completely unhelpful, right? And I said, look, if you could see, I don't know if you can see through the mirror, way up there on the wall, and I'm pointing. Where am I pointing? Here.
Right.
On the wall in the back there, above my kitchen, there's a little plaque, right?
Let me see.
That plaque contains the invitation to the opening of the U.S. Embassy in Macedonia in 1993, and a piece of the red ribbon, because I was the one who cut the red ribbon that opened the U.S. Embassy in 1993 in Macedonia.
Wow. That's amazing.
And I said to the guy, I've been working with the U.S. Embassy for years in that country, right? No report that they drafted left that country without my looking at it first to make sure it was accurate, because they trusted my knowledge and my of the situation.
Right.
And so the concluding paragraph of virtually every report was, economic development will bring political stability. And so that's the opportunity I have to create economic development and bring political stability. And that's why you should approve this. And he was nonplussed. He was not going to be helpful. And ultimately, I called around Washington, tried to find anyone who would help me. Nobody would help me. Not
Uh-huh.
even my congressional representative, Carolyn Maloney, because
Mhm.
she was the co-chair of the Greek caucus.
Oh.
And so, we were having these issues that we discussed earlier, and no way, no how is she going to be helpful to me. So,
but you found
promise.
it.
So then 2 days or 3 days before I had to fly to Macedonia,
Mhm.
Google was brand new. Now we take it for granted. Everyone who listens to this uses Google, right? And so I went to Google. There was there's Copernicus. There were all these different options, but
Right.
I went to Google. It's supposed to be this really good system,
Mhm.
and I typed loss of nationality Supreme Court,
Mhm.
and I clicked it, and boom, 10 hits came up on the screen, and the first hit was from a Supreme Court case in 1988,
Mhm.
which was exactly my situation. And in that court case, the court decided, and I'm quoting, let me think for a second, I'm quoting, absent a declaration of intent by the person committing the potentially expatriating act, comma, the State Department may decide. So basically, all I had to do was write an airtight paragraph to which I would swear, saying I do not intend to lose my U.S. citizenship by taking this job.
Okay.
And if I did that, the State Department couldn't decide otherwise. But if I didn't do that, they could decide I didn't want to be an American anymore and take away my passport.
Okay. Gotcha. Wow.
So I did that, and I flew to Macedonia, and I swore my document in front of the consular officer. Then I went to the parliament. I sat through 2 days of confirmation hearings, and I was so clean and so honest and such a nice guy. They actually had to make a fictitious statement about me because they were attacking everyone else who was in the proposed government, and it was very telling because members of the opposition party leaving power were the ones doing the attacking, and so various people were doing attacking. But because they were making something up about me, only the outgoing prime minister could attack me, even if it was false, right? And I was having things translated for me, but I was so bemused. I was laughing at the guy in parliament, like you're supposed to be really serious and all this. And I'm like, I was laughing. I'm like, you got to be out of your stark raving mind. It's so absurd.
Wow. And so you actually came in because you were smart enough to say not take no for an answer. Basically, that's
yeah.
I mean, imagine if you would have just said, "Oh, well, he's an authority," and that's it. You would have never went there. So that's amazing. Not went there, but been in the position that you were put in. I think that's amazing. And that's the good thing about knowing the law and knowing all the laws, because then you can use them to your advantage when needed. And this is a prime example of, anybody can really do anything if they put their mind to it, and if they know how to utilize all resources. That's how I say it. So thank you, because now we'll be thinking about that.
It's been an hour, so I want to keep you on time.
Yes. Well, my last question to you, do you ever think about running for presidency or anything like that?
So it's really funny. I haven't had that question for a couple of years now, but the pandemic got in the way. But I will tell you, quite candidly, since you raised it, not because I would volunteer that normally, but there have been a number of times on the order of say 3 to 5 times a year where I'm at a reception or a cocktail party or something, meeting someone the very first time. And after a few minutes, that's the question I get.
Well, personally, I would vote for you, and I'd send out a team of army for you if you ever did. I'm just letting you know.
That's very sweet. I will tell you that today I was doing, I don't know how many listeners you have outside of America, but if you're familiar with the democratic process here in at least in New York State, you have to petition. You have to get signatures of people who live in your district in order to be on the ballot to run for office. Right?
Yes.
And so I was doing that for my very good friend Alex Boris, who's running for re-election as New York State Assemblyman.
Okay.
And I was with the chairwoman of the local Democratic club. And at the end of working with her for 2 hours, she turns to me and says, "I'd like to nominate you to become district leader," which is an elected position for the Democrats for the Upper East Side. And I'm like, okay, well, why don't we start this?
I think you should definitely go for it. And I say that because I remember something else that you did. I know you probably don't want me to tell that story, but I love what you did for that homeless couple. And you followed them around and tried to help them get life back in order. And no matter what the result was, I just thought that to me spoke volumes. You know what I'm saying? Because plenty of people walk by and just don't do anything, or just say it's just another one. But you took time. It takes one person doing one thing and then someone else doing one thing, and eventually we'll get there. You know, I just said everything about you that I needed to know. So that's why I said that.
Well, your grandmother wants me to come back next week. So if you want, we can talk about that next week.
Another time to have you back for sure, because I had a whole host of other questions on a lot of the great things you've done, including getting minorities into finance. You know, this whole thing that you did. There's a lot of things you did, and I didn't get to half of them. So, guys, we are missing a lot of volumes of information, and we will have them back. But thank you so much for taking the time, Minister Tashkovich, and that one last thing. Explain to people why we say minister versus who do we say? Well, no, if we say Mr. President, we say Mr. President. But I'm trying to think what's the equivalent of
secretary.
Secretary, yes. And
Secretary,
why do we say minister? Yeah, why do we say minister?
So we have the British system, right? We inherited that to a certain degree. So in the UK and America, we call people secretary, Mr. Secretary, right? But they're ministers in the rest of the world. The rest of the world uses minister.
Got you. It's interesting because if you're in the South, we'll be thinking you're a preacher.
Right. Oh, that happened to me. I went to a church in Atlanta, Georgia.
No, that's the spot.
With Anthony's sister and her family. And it's the custom of introducing any guest you bring. So she introduces me as Minister Tashkovich. And at the end of his sermon, he says, maybe my fellow minister would like to come up and address the congregation. I was like, no, I'm not that kind of minister.
I know that because my mom was a minister. And that's what they would do at the end. Maybe you want to come up and say a word, closing word.
Right.
That's amazing. So I just wanted to clarify. I know, but I wanted my audience to know, because some people just that we don't live in that world, or it's not an everyday thing. So thank you. I appreciate your spirit, and I appreciate you taking the time to come with us. I know you're busy, but hang out for 1 second while I say goodbye to everybody. I appreciate you, guys. I thank you so much for taking time to be back again with us. I appreciate you, and we will, I promise, have him back again, Minister Tashkovich. We will have him back. Okay. So hang out for 1 minute while I say goodbye to everybody. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you.